Michael. With that, I'll pass over to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Michael, I'm an addict.
Hi, Michael.
And if there's any newcomers here, welcome. I was listening to all those readings and I was nodding off, and I started getting paranoid and thought, I hope nobody thinks I'm using. Well, that's where my head goes. I've been doing this for a long time. I got clean in the 80s, so a long time. And I came to my first meeting in 1983 and got clean in 1989. So I'm 36 years clean. And I was one of those addicts. I believe the sort of addict I was the addict that did the drugs in the time they were out. So I was a heroin addict, and I like downers, uppers, you know, all the West End of London drugs, which is where I'm from. And lots of people sort of knew me when I first came to a meeting because I'd used all over London. Usually robbed people, got tick-off dealers and disappeared, all the usual stuff that you do. And but I came to a meeting in 1983, and there were a few people that I knew, and I didn't get clean then. I did another 6 years of research, and in that 6 year period, I call that my wilderness years period because I was very lost and alone. Lots of the people I was using with died. It was also a time where it was HIV and AIDS and all of that, so there was a lot of stuff going on, there was a lot of death in London and probably everywhere. And I was in and out of prison. I was a non-stop shoplifter. I could not keep, I'm a bit of a kleptomaniac. I've addressed that in recovery, so you're safe. But I couldn't be anywhere near a shop, and that was how I sort of financed my using, really, through hoisting every day, and I was out. And I was in and out doing 3-week remands in Pentonville, and then I was in Scrubs, and in and out. And many people that I knew from NA would come up and see me. I mean, my family were all addicts, so they weren't really people I could trust or depend upon. But the people from NA would come and see me in prison. I hated them, absolutely hated them, because they always carried the message. And what I wanted was drugs, because I was usually locked up in a cell with someone like me. We're both sitting there clucking, and we both want a little bit of something to take the edge off. And so a good friend of mine who's still around, and she used to come and see me regularly. For 6 years in and out of prison, she'd come and see me. So the way I look at it, I think I'm a sort of a child of the 12-step message. If it wasn't for the 12-step message and people carrying it to me, I don't believe I'd be here today. Simple as that. So it sort of saved my life. So I'm ever grateful for those people. Many of them have died, not necessarily through drugs or whatever, but they've just died because they've got older. And I believe I've been given something, and it's a bit like a relay race. I've been given a baton, and my job is to keep carrying it and passing it on to other people. And that's what I've been doing for the last 36 years. When I first got clean in the late 80s, I remember I was in this halfway house in southeast London, and there was an artist who was in there. He was coming off gear as well, and he did a caricature of all the different people in the house, and there was about 30 of us in there at the time. And the picture of me, he did all these squares of different people's faces, and there was a picture of me, and the picture was a puff of smoke. And in the middle he wrote, "Gone to a meeting." Because that was me in a sort of halfway house where I was supposed to stay there and do this programme stuff. But I was in love with NA because suddenly I was in a place and I could talk to people, and people knew where I was coming from. They understood my head. They understood what it was like to be on the streets and using drugs, or just using drugs full stop. You don't have to be on the streets using drugs, that's for sure. And but that was what happened to me. And I was very fortunate. The people that I knew that were clean for a little while, they said to me, this stuff's going to be really useful. Stay there, get a bit of clean time under your belt, but you have to actually make that sort of jump from from the treatment place to NA. And so that's what I did, and I'm one of the people that stayed around from that time. I was talking to someone earlier today. I've got an NA basic text, and it's been signed by all these different people. And when I look through it, most of them are dead. Most of them sort of died through relapse, ended up in prison. Some might be clean; they might have gone off to another fellowship or whatever. But a lot of them I haven't seen for years, and so I wish them all the best if they're still around. But that's a sad reality of what we suffer with. It's not a joke. It's it's a form of a condition, whatever you want to call it, whether it's a disease, an illness, but it's something that if you don't address it, it addresses you in different ways, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally. It will eat away at you. And I have a particular type of condition where it's in my head, basically. And if I'm not taking care of myself, that addictive part of my head will constantly be on me, sort of giving me a hard time, making me feel bad about myself, really getting me to a point where I feel like, what's the point? I might as well be using again. And it's there, it's like always taking me back to ground zero. But in those early years of recovery, I think I was a bit bonkers, basically. I certainly wasn't in touch with any feelings at all. I mean, I didn't use drugs in the way I used drugs because I was happy clapping and sort of sorted out. I was wanting to avoid myself at all costs. But I didn't know any of this. I thought I was really quite normal when I was clean. But I didn't realise. I thought everyone else was mad and they had the problems and I was okay. I now realise everyone else is okay and I'm the one that's a bit bonkers. But I was running around. I think in my first year I had about 8 commitments in different meetings. Someone called me Pinball Wizard because I was like whizzing all around London. It's funny because in my using they used to call me Sparky because I used to be on crutches and I'd worn the bottoms off of the crutches, and so when I was going like that someone said there's sparks coming off, and so they nicknamed me Sparky where I was living. I used to do these mad detoxes from heroin to speed. And it was mad, like doing loads of sulphate, banging up sulphate to come off heroin is not a good idea. But I kept doing it because I really hoped it would work at some point, but it didn't. But so when I got clean, basically, I did exactly the same as Sparky. I was just a Sparky in recovery, clean. I just had invisible crutches like pushing me around London, and but I had loads of commitments, and I was sponsoring people at a few months clean. 9 months I took on 2 sponsees, and so I had it all happening for me, and I was doing whatever was suggested. I was a sponsor, I was looking at the steps. At about 2 years clean, I knocked my neighbour flat out because I was a ball of rage. Basically, I was just so full of feelings. And I wasn't addressing anything. I was just like Hawaii 5-0. I was like riding the crest of the wave, and I was, trying to avoid myself, just as the drugs helped me with. And I realised I had a rude awakening. And, I'm a big believer in the spiritual awakening, but I think the rude awakenings come thick and fast in recovery. And I was woken up with a sharp bang, and interviewed by the police, and I thought I was going to lose my flat and all of that. And someone said to me, maybe this is, it's a sign now. You have to make a change, Michael. You've been doing great, but maybe you need to start focusing on yourself a bit and get a bit of balance. Because it's all well and good sort of carrying the message, but you're carrying it like you're fighting a war. And, the only person you're fighting really is yourself. And so I changed sponsors and started looking at myself a bit differently, started looking at myself in a more emotional way. And I think for me that's been the key of my whole recovery ever since, sort of getting the balance right. Because some days, I will want to sort of go to a meeting and talk to a newcomer or somebody that's struggling. And some days I'm the person that goes to the meeting because I need a bit of help. Some days I am like the newcomer who, isn't forgetting what he needs to do, but sometimes, I've lost so many people over the years in recovery, people that I'm really close to died through various illnesses, and this is the only place I've got no family because they all died through addiction. So NA for me is a bit like my very big family, as dysfunctional as my own family was, believe it or not. But it's still my place. This is where I come, and I share honestly. I've always felt it was really important not to try and hide behind theories or words, because I've met too many people in recovery that have not stuck around and they've built up a wall of words. You can't get through to them because they've got a bit of literature to throw at you to keep you at bay. And so I don't want to do that. I want to be someone that actually understands what it's like to walk in this room for the first time and be devastated with life and, you know, so broken and desperately wanting to get some help. You know, I'll never forget what it's like to be a newcomer, because going to those first meetings was so tricky. I don't know about anyone else, but that's why I took on all the commitments. It just kept me out of anyone's radar, kept me on the move. And so I remember what it's like. It takes a huge amount of courage to come to these meetings in your early years, and it still does sometimes in your later years. But over the years, I've done loads of different types of service where I carry the message. In those early years, I did the telephone helpline. It was originally in Chelsea, just off the King's Road, in Lotts Road, around the back of the Scots. And I'd used all round there as well, so it was like walking home around there. But I was doing a left or a right instead of like going into the dealer's house. And but I used to sit in this little office with a friend of mine, and we did the helpline for years. And he's still clean, and we sometimes talk. And it was wonderful talking to people, ringing up saying, I really need some help, and can you help me? And then I had mums and dads ringing me up and saying, you know, I've got a son or a daughter or a husband, they're addicted to whatever. And like trying to help them out and saying, well, this is what worked for us, and you might benefit if you can get them to go to a meeting or something. Just remembering what it was like to be that person. And I did so many different types of service. I did a lot of hospitals and institutions. I set up a meeting in St Mary's in Paddington. I set a detox meeting up for people that were in there coming off various bits and pieces, and they used to come into the detox, and I'd have a little group in there. And it was wonderful because that was my old detox, and it was like, in a way, it was making an amend, not only to myself but also to the detox, because I was there for years at St Mary's, and always trying to get methadone out of them with someone else's, like piss and whatever. We had to give tests or whatever. I always used someone else's. But I suppose the main thing that I've done over the years is sponsorship. I've really enjoyed sponsoring people. It's been the thing that I think has brought me the most pleasure in terms of being able to get close to people. Because I don't know about anyone else, I grew up in a family where nobody really talked to each other with any emotion. It was really unsafe in my family, if the truth is known. There was a lot of violence, a lot of aggression, lots of addiction. It was not a nice place for a young kid to grow up in. But I didn't know any different, so I just became one of those kids that started running away from home from very early on, ended up in the West End when I was 12, hanging out around Piccadilly, watching all the addicts, the dodgy ones, they had bits of their bodies missing. And I thought, we used to throw things at them. All us kids, there were a lot of kids that were sort of all on the streets, hanging out. We used to hate Subway 4, and we used to hate them. And then a few years later, I was there. That was a thing, I've never forgotten that. The very people I hated was the very people very person I became. So, be careful, when you look at people and make a judgment, because they're for the grace of God, I guess, sometimes. But that's why I've really grown so much with sponsorship, in terms of being able to sit down with someone and open up. I mean, my first sponsor was great, and I did a lot of step work, and then I changed sponsors, and the next sponsor was great as well. And the next sponsor, it was much more intense, because I started looking at my family, and I did a step 4 about just looking at family patterns and behaviours, and actually what really helped to shape and form me into the person that then started to use drugs. And I realised in doing that 4th step and 5th step that if I hadn't found drugs, I think I would have died. I would have topped myself, because I just wasn't really equipped to deal with what life was going to bring me. And this is what NA's given me. It's given me a set of tools, which we call principles, to equip me to live life. And I think that's very, very simply, I think that's what NA's done for me. It's enabled me to get some things in place within me that most people have, sort of so-called normal people. Of course they have their problems, but they also have a way to live life that it doesn't mean they have to drink themselves silly or put loads of drugs into their body every single day. They can get through life and by life. But yeah, I don't know where I'd be without any. You see, it's thank you. I think it's been such an incredible thing for me. I was saying to someone earlier today, when I first got clean, I went back, I was away from London for a little while and then went back to my flat after a while. And it's a council flat, and I'm still in the same flat, and I love it. And but for years I was a nightmare to my neighbours, an absolute fucking nightmare. You know, I'd have people coming around. I had no gas or electricity for a while, so my mates would come around and just ring every row of bells in the middle of the night, because I lived on the top floor. So they would just wait there was a block of 4 houses, and I lived sort of the second one along at the top. So they just ring all the doorbells. So they got a thing together trying to get me evicted, which in those days was quite difficult, interesting enough, in the 80s. You couldn't get people out of flats too easily. And within 2 years of me being in recovery, I became the treasurer of the committee that the houses are set up to sort of try and get works done. So, and I know it sounds crazy, it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing for me, because I was the one they wanted to get rid of, and suddenly I'm the one they thought, he's trustworthy, he's all right. We can actually give him I had a checkbook with their names on of the committee, and I had thoughts, I thought, I can nick this money and do a runner. I think it was about 50 quid or whatever. You know, but I still had the thoughts, do you know what I mean? But it was incredible for me. I felt so privileged. Again, it sounds so small, but those things, they really boosted my self-esteem. They really made me feel, this is what I'm doing it for. And then, you know, and I remember doing the 12-step calls work in those early years as well. You know, we used to sit in the office and we'd have a list of names who would go out and do 12-step calls, and I was doubled up with a friend of mine. And on a Saturday morning, they'd give you a call and they say, right, this person's contacted the helpline, they want to go to a meeting. And we'd get up and sort of drive around there or go and meet them somehow and then take them to a meeting. And I remember about 5 years later, there was a guy that I took to a meeting, and he was 5 years clean. Wow. It's that sort of, it touches me. It always gets to me because it's like saving people's lives. I'm not thinking I save people's lives, but I think we do something that helps people to save their own life. Because everything's here, it's on offer for people, but it's about whether they feel comfortable and capable of taking hold of it. It's like we reach out and hopefully they'll hold on to my hands. Anyway, I always get a bit touched by this because it's so powerful for me. But I don't want to say too much more because it's it's a biggish meeting, and I think for me the 12 steps are in an order, and each step awakens something in terms of principles and different ways of looking at things, humility, sort of having some sort of self-discipline, commitment. All of those things are so crucial to living life on life's terms, and those are the things I never had. I actually did have them, but I only applied them to drug using. I was very committed as an addict, extremely committed. I was very disciplined. If the dealer said to me, turn up at 10 o'clock, I might turn up a bit earlier and he'd tell me to F off. But I'd come back in 5 minutes. I was very disciplined in that way. Good timekeeper, and respecting the dealers. And but that's the thing. Each one of the steps has brought some more of that stuff out in me, and I've been able to really sort of come to terms and make peace with all the people I harmed. There's a lot of people that if I saw them today, I haven't seen them for decades, but if I was to bump into them, I wouldn't feel uncomfortable in saying I'm sorry about some of the stuff that went down in the 70s or the 80s. And it's nice to be able to do that without saying, well, I did this because you did this, without expecting something in return. It's nice to be able to just keep your side of the street clean. Anyway, I'm not going to say much more. I just, for me, hopefully this has meant something to some people. And if you're new around, keep coming back and stick around. It's a slow process. People like to think it's fast. And yeah, you can do it as fast as you want, but believe you me, you have to go back to the beginning if you do it fast. Just as the same as you do it slow, you have to go back to the beginning again. So yeah, anyway, I'll leave it there and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Michael.